Friends, it's time for another horror movie. Today, we're continuing the Evil Dead series with Evil Dead Rise. The story begins one night. 3 kids are on their way home when suddenly the entire basement starts to shake violently. Before they could react, the ground cracked open like a wide, gaping mouth, ready to devour them. Luckily, the kids managed to hide just in time and narrowly escape disaster. After a while, the shaking stops, but just as they're about to head back home, Danny notices a hole in the ground. Curious, he walks over to check it out and finds a hidden room. They lived in a condemned apartment building, and their mother was a single mom. To ease the financial burden at home, he didn't hesitate to climb inside. After some rummaging, he finds a box. Inside the box, there was a photo of the priest, along with 3 unopened vinyl records, all marked with the date January 24th, 1923. Just as he's about to pack up these items, a strange sound comes from the side. But Danny doesn't think much of it and proceeds to put the record in his backpack. Suddenly, the same strange sound happens again. Driven by curiosity, he slowly walks over to the source of the noise. There, he finds many crucifixes hanging on the wall, and below them, there's a stone box. But Danny is still young and doesn't understand what any of these things mean. At that moment, the box cracks open. When Danny looks inside, he finds a mysterious bundle and takes it out. However, just as he was about to open the package, he looked at the package again, and to his surprise, an ancient book appeared before him. Thinking the book might be worth something, he decides to take it home. If he could sell it for a good price, it would lighten their mother's burden. Later, Danny tries to open the book, but in his eagerness, he accidentally pricks his finger. Before they can react, the book eerily opens by itself. Danny is shocked by this. He hurriedly flips through the ancient book, only to find disturbing, bloody scenes on every page. The further he flips, the more terrifying the images become. His sister Bridget gets so scared that she quickly slams the book shut and says she has a bad feeling. She tells Danny to return the book first thing in the morning. Though Danny agrees, he can't resist the curiosity. Once Bridget walks away, he plays the phonograph record. A priest's voice begins to speak, telling a story of a gathering of fellow priests at a church. Many overseas priests had been invited to this event. He says that the purpose of the gathering is to reveal a special artifact, the legendary Book of the Dead. The book's cover is made from human body parts, and the text and drawings inside are written in human blood. The priest believes that the Book of the Dead holds many unknown secrets, and tonight he plans to translate its contents. However, many of the overseas priests disagree with this plan. They believe there's a reason why it's called the Book of the Dead and think it should be destroyed immediately. As the argument intensifies, the phonograph record ends. Next, Danny plays the second phonograph record, and this time, it's a monologue from the priest. After being rejected by everyone to translate the book, I secretly began translating with 2 other priests. The book contains many rituals and incantations. It's said that once the incantations are spoken, one can make contact with supernatural forces. With that, the priest begins to chant the first incantation. Danny is so frightened that he can't continue listening. He tried to stop the record player, but strangely, no matter how many times he pressed the button, the player wouldn't stop. At that moment, the Book of the Dead begins to move on its own, as if it has come to life. Meanwhile, something rushes into the basement. Ellie steps out of the elevator, only to be slammed back by an invisible force. The elevator begins to rise rapidly, only stopping at the top floor. The Book of the Dead stops flipping, and the image now shows a death scene of a woman. Before long, Ellie wakes up. The elevator is broken, and Ellie's screams for help are useless. The entire hallway looks eerily silent. Ellie tries to pry open the elevator doors, but suddenly, a strange sound comes from behind her. As Ellie stands there confused, a mysterious force pushes her, and the same strange sound fills the air. This leaves her even more confused. The sound is right next to her, but why can't she see anything? Then, a wire drops down and lifts her up into the air. As Ellie nears suffocation, she desperately tries to step on something nearby to support herself. Finally, she manages to do it. However, just as Ellie is about to breathe a sigh of relief, the wire comes back again, tying her hands and feet and leaving her suspended in midair. Meanwhile, the power goes out at home, and the phonograph stops. Danny goes to fix the fuse and Bridget lights a candle. Suddenly, the door opens. Ellie is back. Bridget doesn't notice anything strange because she has no idea what happened with the elevator. Ellie doesn't acknowledge the kids and walks straight into the kitchen. She turns on the gas stove, places a pot on it, and starts tossing eggs into the pot, shell and all. Seeing this, Beth is puzzled and thinks her sister must have been affected by something. Beth is a national tour guitarist and a regular at bars. One day, she finds out she's pregnant. She's due for a tour, and this promotion is crucial for her career. For a moment, she doesn't know what to do, so she goes to Ellie for advice on the decision. At this moment, Ellie was muttering to herself, occasionally flashing an evil smile. Before anyone could react, Ellie's body began to tremble uncontrollably. It seemed like she was battling the demon for control of her body. Soon, Ellie's consciousness takes over her body, and just as she says, "It's inside me," the demon seizes control again. Then, Ellie collapsed to the floor, crawling toward them in a twisted, unnatural way. Just as her child is about to be harmed, Ellie battles the demon again. With a burst of white liquid, she finally overpowers it. She asks her sister to protect her child, and before the words even leave her mouth, Ellie passes out. Beth wants to rush her to the hospital, but the elevator won't work. Even worse, the stairs collapsed, looking like the gaping maw of an abyss. This is a half-finished building, and the earlier earthquake caused the stairway to collapse. With no other options, Beth asks the neighbor for help. Mr. Fonda tries to call for help, but there's no signal. Seeing that Ellie had stopped breathing, they could only offer a simple prayer. But the most important thing now is finding an escape route. Gabriel mentions that there's an old ladder on the north side of the hallway, and he could try to climb down and find someone to help. However, the ladder is locked behind a door, and they need to pry it open first. Gabriel and Mr. Fonda immediately get to work, but prying open the door proves to be difficult. Gabriel hits it repeatedly, but there's no response. On the other side, Beth suddenly received a call. The caller was her sister, Ellie. She said she was about to be burned alive and begged Beth to help her immediately. Before Beth could react, the phone shattered instantly. Clearly, the demon was at work. When Beth cautiously turned around, Ellie had risen from the dead. Not only that, but she sat up unnaturally. Beth instinctively touched Ellie, only to find her body was scalding hot, as if it had been boiled in hot water. Beth quickly tried to cool Ellie down, but as soon as she touched cool water, Ellie's body began convulsing uncontrollably. No matter how hard the others tried to hold her down, they couldn't calm her. Suddenly, Ellie's whole body flew into the air. Ellie's expression revealed that the demon had taken control of her body, but the demon didn't harm anyone. Instead, it made a strange noise with a penetrating sound so strong that even the neighbors outside could hear it clearly. Then, Beth began to feel dizzy, and the water in the bathtub started boiling. The walls around them began to crack slowly. Ellie once again fought the demon, and not long after she crawled out of the bathtub. Danny thought his mother had risen from the dead, but the next moment, the demon's voice was heard. The demon said Ellie was already dead, and Ellie had used her last bit of consciousness to make the demon stop screaming. If not, they would all be dead by now. With the demon getting closer, Beth hurriedly grabbed Danny and ran, but soon the demon followed them, holding a shard of glass. Without saying a word, it stabbed Beth, and her palm was pierced by the glass. Luckily, Bridget shouted at the right moment, calling for her mother, and Beth narrowly escaped. She wanted to try waking her mother up, but soon realized it was pointless. The demon lunged at Bridget, but didn't kill her immediately. Instead, it slashed her face with a sharp object. Just then, Danny arrived and stopped the demon from hurting his sister. Soon after, Gabriel entered the room. The demon immediately lunged at him, biting off his eye and then spitting it into the mouth of a nearby child. Seeing this, Beth immediately locked the door to keep the monster from getting in. Ellie had warned her to protect the children, and she had no choice but to act this way. When Beth looked outside again, she saw the demon chasing a neighbor's child. A loud scream followed, and the neighbor's child was killed by the demon. Before Beth could react, Gabriel suddenly began banging on the door, pleading for Beth to help him. But the demon didn't give him a chance and slit his throat. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. It was Mr. Fonda, who had been searching for the demon. However, while he wasn't paying attention, the demon ambushed him. From the sounds outside, it was clear that Mr. Fonda had also been killed by the demon. Not long after, the demon approached, staring intently at the peephole. Beth didn't dare to look outside. She hurriedly went to the window to call for help. Though someone was walking on the street, the rain was so heavy that Beth's cries for help went unheard. Maybe sensing that everything was connected to the book, Danny told Beth about it. Looking at the cruel images in the book, Beth was stunned. On the other side, Bridget noticed that the wound on her face seemed to be getting worse. Just when she was confused, the wound suddenly moved. At the same time, she heard the demon's voice behind her. Before she could react, more gray liquid began flowing from the wound. Perhaps the liquid was blocking her throat. Bridget tried to use water to ease it, but it had no effect. A wave of nausea hit her and she vomited a mass of worms onto the table. Before long, Beth arrived and saw Bridget crouching on the kitchen counter, looking very eerie. Though scared, Beth gathered her courage and walked forward. At that moment, Bridget turned around, now chewing on a glass cup. She had been fully possessed by the demon. Beth tried to run but tripped and fell. As Bridget got closer, Beth grabbed a frying pan and swung it at her. Then Danny arrived, and Bridget suddenly opened her eyes. This time, she turned her attention to Danny. In panic, Danny ran into his sister Cassie's room. Seeing Cassie inside, Bridget lunged at her. Cassie inadvertently impaled Bridget's head with the broken broom handle. The horrifying thing was that Bridget didn't die. She pulled the broomstick out, but luckily, she didn't continue attacking. Perhaps the injury was too severe, and the demon could no longer control Bridget's body. Fearing that Bridget might resurrect like the demon, Danny tied her up. Then, Beth used the battery to generate power. She wanted to listen to the third record and see if there was a way to kill the demon. To prevent herself from being affected by the demon, she first gave Danny a knife and then locked the children outside. As the record slowly played, the priest's voice appeared again. He said this recording was a warning. The Book of the Dead cannot be destroyed. He and other priests had tried to drive the demon away, but not only was the demon not afraid, it even possessed one of the priests. He tried to kill the possessed person, but unfortunately, no matter what he did, the possessed person wouldn't die. If you want to end it all you can do is run. Meanwhile, Bridget had resurrected. Danny, in order to protect his sister, immediately stabbed her with the knife. However, this wound couldn't hurt the demon at all. Bridget first pinned Danny to the wall and then pulled the knife out with her bare hands. Before Danny could react, his arm was pierced by the knife. Then Bridget floated into the air, spewing a large amount of fluid at Danny, and then pulled the knife out and stabbed it into Danny's chest. Danny didn't just sit there and wait to die. He used a gas can to spray large amounts of flames. For a moment, Bridget was covered in flames, and the demon temporarily left her body. Meanwhile, Ellie, who was possessed by the demon, made a new discovery. There was a ventilation pipe on her head. Soon, Ellie used the pipe to crawl into Beth's room. Luckily, Beth saw Ellie through the mirror and narrowly escaped. Seeing that there was no way out, Beth grabbed a screwdriver and stabbed. But the demon wasn't afraid at all, not even showing a change in expression. Beth, terrified, quickly ran out. Seeing that Danny was on the brink of death, she rushed to check on him. At that moment, Ellie suddenly appeared and pressed Beth to the ground. At this time, Cassie noticed a pair of scissors nearby and immediately threw them to Beth. Beth grabbed the scissors and stabbed them into Ellie, and Ellie instantly stopped moving. While the demon hadn't revived yet, Beth took Cassie and headed for the hallway. They were about to break the door and leave. Beth was about to go up and fire another shot when Mr. Fonda suddenly came back to life, causing the bullet to miss the demon's vital spot. And it wasn't just Mr. Fonda who came back to life. Bridget, Danny, and all the neighbors who had died were also resurrected. Left with no choice, Beth and Cassie had to hide in the elevator. Beth pressed the elevator button, and to her surprise, the power suddenly came back on. However, a thick red liquid began seeping from the button. When they looked down, they saw the same red liquid oozing from the floor. Meanwhile, the demons had all gathered together. The Book of the Dead also seemed to be in a wild frenzy, finally stopping on the page with the monster drawing. This monster had only one head, but multiple legs. It was called Marauder. On Beth's side, the red liquid had already risen past her shoulders. She planned to crawl into the pipe above, but realized the monster was hiding in there. As the red liquid rose over their heads, Beth and Cassie passed out. Due to the elevator being overloaded, it plummeted straight to the ground floor. As soon as the doors opened, a massive surge of red liquid gushed out. Soon, Beth and Cassie woke up and hurriedly jumped into the car to leave. However, after driving for a short while, the car's tires got stuck. At this point, the marauder had caught up. Beth knew they were no match for it, so she quickly hid to the side. Watching the door in the distance about to close, Beth rushed over with Cassie. Although Beth managed to escape, Cassie wasn't as lucky. The marauder pulled her back. Just as the chainsaw was about to strike Cassie's head, Beth came back just in time with a shotgun. The marauder shifted its focus again. Instead of charging directly at Beth, it threw a chainsaw at her. To avoid the attack, Beth slipped and fell. The marauder seizes the opportunity, dragging her toward a wood chipper. Seeing this, Cassie rushes to shut off the machine, saving Beth's life. Then, Beth grabbed the chainsaw. As Marauder approached the wood chipper, Cassie quickly turned on the machine. This time, they finally defeated the marauder. Even if the marauder revives, it will take some time. To prevent more marauders from appearing, Beth made sure to take the chainsaw with her as they left. But the movie wasn't over. Remember, the marauder can never truly die. On this day, Jessica from the 5th floor goes to the underground parking garage, having planned a lakeside vacation with her friend. However, just as she was about to leave, the wood chipper behind her caught her attention. Curious, she walked over. The floor was covered in body parts, and she was horrified. Just as she was about to call the police, a strange noise came from behind her. Before she could react, an invisible force struck her. The scene shifts to a forest cabin. At this point, Jessica was already delirious. Teresa thought she was just sick and didn't pay much attention. Soon, Jessica started talking to herself, and after she finished, she collapsed to the ground. Teresa hurried over to check on her. At that moment, Jessica suddenly opened her eyes and clutched Teresa's throat tightly. Then, enduring the pain, Teresa finds Caleb fishing by the lake. Seeing the injured Teresa, Caleb is shocked. At that moment, Jessica walked over, grabbed a drone, and smashed it on herself before falling into the lake. Seeing this, Caleb immediately jumped into the water to save Jessica. But moments later, the water's surface was left covered in blood. As Teresa grieved, Jessica floated on the lake's surface, clearly now fully under the demon's control. Well, folks, that's the end of today's story. See you next time.